Cipher, um, which is the communication privacy management theory. And in this presentation, I'm going to be going over some of the positives, some of the negatives that are associated with this theory, kind of where it comes from, who created it, what is it, and then kind of why is it important. And a lot of the topics I'm going to be relating to, and a lot of the information is going to be stuff that I found within the reading. Um, and stuff that was discussed by the actual creator of the theory. So, we're just going to go from there. But yes, so let's get started. So yes, this is the my presentation on communication privacy management theory. So, what is communication privacy management theory? So, to understand communication privacy management theory, we first have to kind of dissect it. So, this theory is a basic understanding of the exchange of personal information in accordance with every individual to their personal preference. It also defines the depth of our relationship that has a rule-based system to follow of how this information is exchanged and the level of permeability that apply. These eventually evolve into the friendships and romantic relationships we have today. So, kind of like what it's saying there is like the biggest part of this theory is the depiction and defiance of personal private information to other people and like how we choose who deserves and who doesn't deserve to get to know that information and being able to open up to those people, especially in depth over time, creates such like unique types of bonds, and that is what is the foundation of our relationships, especially when we're younger, and we're kind of just meeting those people in school and figuring out the people that we have similarities with. That's kind of like the area where we're really digging into this opening up to people, and those are what evolve our relationships and friendships. It is essentially provides the framework or roadmap to how people disclose and manage their private information. For example, if someone has a secret that they feel that they can only disclose to their mom, but maybe not their friend, this would represent the different levels of allowing access to that personal private information. And the management of who gets access to the information is the very topic of that this theory defines. And yeah, that's kind of just reinstating what I said before. Like it is really just the idea of private information within this theory and the concept that is so important. The sharing of this information is limited to each individual due to the fact that most individuals believe they own their own private information. A lot of the times that people actually share private information, though, it really is actually about other people. It really not isn't necessarily about their lives. This leading to every individual, of course, believing that they own their private information and saying who gets access and who doesn't. The theory identifies the idea of disclosures as incredibly important to our everyday lives for allowing the depth in relationships. This, as said before, is what develops into our more intimate relationships, and revealing this personal information is usually what allows someone to care for us and grow that emotional empath for us. So, again, disclosure, just incredibly important concept in understanding what this theory is, and it's kind of just like disclosure over time, disclosure in depth, and it's just being able to open up to someone over time and just being able to say, I want to be able to tell you this now, but I don't feel comfortable telling you about this part of my life until maybe like, a couple months down the road. But that's just kind of how you get to know people and get to see if, they're really good and good natured. I think it's by getting to know just kind of like about them as a person in depth and through their past. So this leads me into where does the theory come from? So the theory was developed by Sandra Petronio and introduced in 1991, known as the communication boundary management. And when she developed this theory, she mainly wanted to depict like the boundaries that people set between the public and personal information in general. But in 2002, it was eventually renamed to the communication privacy management theory, with the goal of putting more of a main focus on the backbone of disclosure of the private information, as I've been saying. It's just the disclosure of the private information is really what she wanted to touch on in this theory and kind of focus on throughout these steps and throughout this map road that she's created that depicts like how people go through these levels of opening up. She's highly regarded for her immense strong suit in communication areas of privacy, confidentiality, and disclosure. When developing the theory, Petronio referenced a boundary concept that could help define it. This was defined with the development of the theory because there's a basic understood boundary between public and private information as stated before, which was the main concept of the name of the communication boundary management. And then Petronio wanted to capture the aspects of how people follow a rule-based format once they disclose private information to an individual and how they can evolve in a relationship within their own personal lives. And this being said, again, this kind of depicts like how it went from just the basic boundary setting to the exchange of that information that was so important. And understanding like how that information is exchanged, how it's exchanged over time, to what level with each person, stuff like that. Um, a main reason this theory was developed by Petronio was because she defined the connection amongst people as incredibly important in the progression of society. With this being said, it's better understanding the idea of disclosure amongst relationships with this theory and can help others better manage their private information. Because a big problem that people can have, especially today for some reason, is that a lot of people just like want their own personal gain, even if it means kind of like screwing someone else over. And a lot of the times, like people will have them open up to them to get to know their insecurities and their close spots so they can use it against them. And I guess this theory kind of like gives someone a better idea of how to manage that, how to know how to share it in a productive way, and just be productive in general. So yes, and then that leads me into the positive and negatives of this theory. So some of the positives of this theory, as stated before, this theory gives a better understanding to individuals on how to disclose private information in a private way, but still to be productive. A huge perk is how it allows people to be smarter in understanding the effects of disclosing their private information. It can save individuals from disclosing information to someone who might use it against them. As said before, if you're in a bad relationship and you kind of open up to someone way too fast, you may not know them as a person and they may use it against you, and that'd be really unfortunate. So this theory kind of gives a better understanding of how to be able to break down and open up to someone in a productive way through that roadmap. It benefits relationships greatly, with one of the most important factors being communication. Communication in relationships, it's incredibly important for understanding how to disclose private information to allow the other person to get and create depth, as said multiple times. This theory just kind of revolves around the idea of being able to emotionally open up to somebody and getting to know them just more as a person, more as just their morals and stuff like that. It's just learning the value of your own private information is also incredibly important in the development of self-love and self-respect. Overall, it positively impacts the depth of our relationships and the value of information amongst people. It also allows them to depict who is worthy and not worthy of their private information and better manage their time and priorities. And this leads me into the negatives of this theory possibly that can be perceived. So, one main issue with this theory is that it mainly focuses on individual relationship development, like one-on-one relationships, and being able to open up to that rather than like group social settings. And I do feel it's incredibly important to understand how to depict group social settings and how to be able to kind of interject your word and have your word respected. And also, not only doing that, but also just getting to know somebody in depth through those conversations of group settings, which can be much more daunting than one-on-one settings. Um, it takes away power from how private information is disclosed in these public settings and can sometimes cause individuals to feel possibly out of place, maybe due to different levels of private information bugging them. Due to the most people having belief that they're in charge of their private information within this theory, it can cause fractures amongst others through not feeling comfortable sharing that private information with someone. Overall, this theory itself has more of an individual outlook rather than a group outlook, as stated before. There are numerous, positive and negatives. That's what you're going to have with really any said theory. But I think the idea of this theory in general, what you really need to take away from it is just the premise of what it's trying to say. And what it's really trying to say, as said before, is just to pick through that roadmap how individuals open up with this information, how it's disclosed over time, who is worthy of this information, because every single one of those details for every personal one of us it's so different. So I think it's just really being able to adapt to how and what's best for you in these situations. And this leads me into the real life examples. So one example could be like doctor confidentiality with patients, because you really can't, well, not really, you obviously can't have doctors spreading kind of what's going on with you through other people that aren't disclosed to you, or maybe like not at your discretion. Not only because like it of course can be incredibly embarrassing, but it can also have a lot of like different issues. If people want to take legal action or something, if they might have like a sexually transmitted disease or something, it could just be a complete mess, and it's definitely important to kind of keep that confidentiality, especially in those embarrassing situations, to learn how to deal with it. Another example could be a teacher discussing your grade with you after class. I think this is a great example just because that's a perfect example of like private confidentiality between two people. And of course, like your teacher's not going to be like, hey, class, this is what he got on the test or she got on the test. Disclosing because like maybe you didn't do so hot, but you maybe had the impression that you did. And an announcement like that would not only be a violation of your private information, but it could also be just like a very embarrassing moment and just be very, I don't know quite the word, I guess like very like demoralizing. I could just be very demoralizing in a situation like that. So I think teacher relationships with students in that aspect is incredibly important for keeping that type of test information private. And then a third aspect could be a therapist relationship with an individual. Therapist confidentiality is incredibly important, especially just in not only understanding the patient and being able to communicate with them, but it also will make them feel that they're in a much safer place if they're not having their information told to someone behind their back or something like that. But it's also incredibly important for because if information about possibly them harming themselves or like someone else is shared, that's like a situation where the therapist has to break that agreement and tell somebody. And I think that is obviously a breakage of for like the protection of that person individually, but also like just trying to keep everyone safe through the idea of getting to know that person, which goes hand in hand with this theory, but also the confidentiality part. So this kind of leads me to my last point of why is it important. So the theory itself is important for helping us understand more about each other as humans because we are such social beings and we need to interact with each other to understand the world. And in order to do that, I feel that the situations where you're able to learn who someone is and what they care about and their motives puts you in a much safer setting than going in a room where you know absolutely nothing about anyone. This is incredibly important due to humans, as said, being such social beings and needing that level of communication amongst each other. It's important in defining how relationships are structured and developed, and I feel that's incredibly important in today in understanding how relationships are developed because a lot of people just go into it way too fast, not knowing some of the morals and things they need to learn and know, and that's a huge part of the divorce rate today. And I think that being able to depict what this theory is trying to say, being able to understand what the relationship is you have at hand, how to navigate it, how to disclose yourself in it are incredibly important concepts that this theory presents.